Florida, a team that, you know, the highs and lows of Florida, I can't imagine there's been a team in the past 10 years, and they really have done a good job, as they should do every single year, at least at the top. It's another top-heavy class, not unlike what Michigan's done, but at the top, they're very impressive, and notably enough, they're getting kids from all over the Eastern Seaboard. Yep. And that's what they have done. They've recruited the Northeast very well. But you look at the top kids, the top 4 kids, at least on this list, according to the 24/7 composite, not from the state of Florida.
No, they did a better job outside of Florida this year for the most part. We should note Florida was on pace to have a great South Florida class.
Yes.
But that was before they went 4-8. Obviously, running the Florida State side, I have a lot of people ask me, why would this kid go to Florida? And I said, look, Florida to them is not a 4-8 program. They were
Correct.
a 4-8 team, but Florida's won 2 national titles since these kids were in first grade.
Yeah, how many programs can raise their hand saying they won 2 national titles in the
I
past 8
think 3.
years?
Them, LSU, and Bama.
Right.
I think, and then the other 5 have been singles. So that still resonates with kids. Certainly, Florida's facilities didn't go away from being 4-8.
Right.
They still have a coaching staff that, while fans may not like some fans may not like, the players for Florida really like them. So when they go on official visits, kids are told really good things. I know they flipped Trayon Harris today from Florida State. Florida is moving to a spread offense, so they really tried to get some kids this year that will, today that will fit into their spread offense and some kids that will make an early impact. And look at the list here. We had the list up on the board, but expanded list. They have 9 early enrollees.
Yeah.
This is kind of a make or break year for Will Muschamp.
Oh, absolutely.
And so if these kids are going to compete early and make an impact, getting them in early really is a big difference. And having about a third of your class get in early is a pretty big deal. I like Brandon Powell a lot. He's a kid who's not on our board, but I think he's a potential impact guy as a running back slot type in that new spread offense.
Yep.
Will Greer was one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Jalen Tabor is a corner who I think is going to fit perfectly into what Will Muschamp.
Committed to Arizona for about an hour and a half.
Yes, exactly. A kid who Maryland really wanted as well,
right,
out of that D.C. area. And they did a nice job. Duke Dawson is a kid who I think competes very well. They grabbed Gerald Willis, another player out of New Orleans that LSU thought they were going to get, and they ended up not. Gerald Willis, also whose mom is also the mom of Landon Collins, and who notably had kind of the meltdown on TV 2 years ago when Collins chose to go play in Tuscaloosa and not in New Orleans. And then they grabbed Thomas Howling, a kid who was a Penn State commit. Penn State loses Coach Larry Johnson to Ohio State, and they pick up a 5-star defensive tackle out of Brooklyn. So it's a nice class for Florida. It could have been better, but by adding some of the guys they missed on. I know they were really hoping to have Adoree Jackson. I thought they were really very much in on Adoree Jackson and had one of the best shots to sign him along with LSU. But it's a nice class. Is it exactly what they needed? I'm not sure, but I think it does fill a lot of their needs.
Will Greer, as a quarterback, you mentioned him being one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Anybody he compares to immediately, how's his size? Because honestly, the quarterback position, Tyler Murphy decides to transfer. There's not a ton of depth there. They have Spencer Morningweg. They bring in, who did they bring in last year?
Oh, gosh. The kid who, I forget.
In any case, the quarterback position is certainly, there's no lock on that job.
Right.
Who do you compare Will Greer to? How ready is he for the college game?
Stylistically, his throwing motion reminds me a little bit of kind of a cleaner Phillip Rivers. Now, some people make fun of Phillip Rivers' throwing motion, and I'm not trying to knock Will Greer. In fact, I like his motion. I think he throws a really good ball. He's accurate. He has good ball placement. If you watch his film, certainly not the best competition there in the Charlotte Catholic League, but his guys are able to catch the football and make plays after the catch. And certainly, he needs to add some size. He's a smaller guy. If he's 200 pounds right now, I'd be shocked.
Okay.
But I think he could eventually be a bigger guy, and certainly someone who Florida's very happy to sign. Jeff Driscoll is probably still going to hold on to that job, I'd have to imagine. But Greer getting it early, I think at least gives him somewhat of a shot to get in there and compete for it.
Fair enough, and very few people know as much about the Florida Gators. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing after 2013, but we now bring in Andy Hutchins from Alligator Army. I can't imagine there's a better site covering Florida football or even SB Nation in terms of the Celebrity Hot Tub in Spencer Hall, the trinity of them and Alligator Army, whatever it is. Andy Hutchins, how are you? Can you hear me?
I am good. I would have been better if 10 minutes ago Adoree Jackson had put on that blue and orange cleat, but didn't happen.
That does happen. So when you look at this year's class, of course, now minus Adoree Jackson, what names stand out to you as guys with the Florida team going through some transition, both in terms of personnel and coaching-wise, that should be able to immediately make an impact and or shoot atop or near the top of the Florida depth chart in multiple places?
I think the people you're going to look at when you're looking from fan perspectives is you've got to look at Will Grier. He's the guy who makes all the records happen. He's the guy who throws the ball like Florida fans want quarterbacks to throw the ball, but he's not going to be the quarterback this fall. Jalen Tabor, on the other hand, early enrollee, really talented cornerback, comes into a situation where you have Marcus Roberson and Lucas Purifoy both leaving for the NFL.
Yep.
Jalen Watkins also departing from that secondary. Obviously, he's got some talent. There's lots of playing time available. If he comes in, he's an early enrollee. Obviously, he'll get spring practice. Maybe he takes that job opposite Vernon Hargraves. It could happen.
All right, fair enough. And when you look at the prospects that Florida has maybe deeper beneath these top 5 guys that, for whatever reason, probably aren't ready, and many are not, to immediately come in and compete in the SEC, what names stand out to you as projects, guys that intrigue you, perhaps not for this year, but for down the line?
I think a really interesting project guy is Taven Bryant, who is recruited out of Wyoming, and Wyoming never produces top recruits. This is, I think, the first guy that Wyoming's had signed anyone since the 90s. But he's really, really good on tape. He's big, he's physical. He's the kind of guy who you could maybe see turning into a J.J. Watt type of defensive end a long time down the line, maybe 2 or 3 years. But Florida got on him before anybody else really did, and secured his commitment, and now he's here and working out and all that good stuff.
All right, and when you look at the past couple of classes this year, last year, perhaps the year before that, how do you evaluate the job that Will Muschamp has done in attracting the right fits for what they used to do and are now trying to do on both sides of the ball for Florida?
I think you can't fault him at all for the defensive recruiting because he goes out and gets 5 stars and elite talent at really just every position. The problem you might have this year is there's no linebacker, but Florida pulled in 4 linebackers, all of whom looked to be really good last year, so there's no real depth issue there. But on offense, you just wonder about the skill position talent a little bit. Last year you pulled in DeMarcus Robinson and Amal Fullwood, who both looked pretty good in flashes in 2013, but beyond them, there's not a whole lot of surety at wide receiver. And then at running back, you've got Kelvin Taylor, who people think is pretty good, but you missed on Dalvin Cook, who flipped to Florida State, so you missed on your home run hitter. And then beyond Kelvin Taylor, you've got Matt Jones, who's coming off injury and who no one knows what he's actually going to be in the fall. And it's a question mark at a lot of different positions on offense right now.
Who do you expect to be starting at receiver, a position that is still sort of, completely shrouded in mystery?
Quentin Dunbar obviously is the incumbent at one position, the wide receiver corps, but Fullwood could be the guy on the other side. Robinson could be the guy on the other side. They've obviously both got talent. I think you need to look at both Ryan Sousa and C.J. Wharton, who just committed today. 2 guys who could come in and maybe be the slot guy in this new Kurt Roper offense. And they've definitely got some skills, and they've been really productive in Florida leagues that are pretty competitive, so that's an interesting perspective. But, Florida's got to develop talent that it's got on hand, so maybe that means turning Andre DeBose, who we were talking about 6 years ago now, into something that you could actually look at and say, okay, that's a football player, not just a guy who runs straight lines really, really fast.
All right,
so
fair enough.
That's really Florida's problem.
Okay, do you expect this team to be put together in an efficient enough way to run the new offensive scheme that they are looking to do and be more wide open? Bud just talked about them making an effort to really change things up because it is an enormous make-or-break year for Will Muschamp. Is the personnel there to run that type of offense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you simplify things for Jeff Driscoll, which is going to be one of the watchwords this fall and this spring in Florida, if you make the reads easier for Jeff Driscoll and maybe make his legs the primary part of what you do on offense, which you can do now that you've got Will Grier and Treon Harris coming in to be better backups than Florida had in 2013, maybe you make a sort of hybrid spread run Auburn-type offense a really interesting thing under Roper. And Roper, we know, can do a lot of different things with different levels of talent. Obviously, he was not working with great talent at Duke, despite what Dalvin Cook thinks. So, there's a lot of hope that the flexibility that Roper's going to be able to bring in is going to be a good thing for Florida. And I think that there's talent, as long as it gets developed, for Florida to rebound really well from that 2013 season that just didn't go the way anyone expected.
Perfect. Well, Andy, unless you have anything to add?
Andy, I do want to ask you a little bit about J.C. Jackson, obviously a very talented two-way type player who sees himself as a defensive back. I know Florida recruited him as a defensive back. Given how loaded they are on defense and the need for playmakers on offense, how much do you think they may want to try him on offense?
I mean, I think he's the sort of guy that you throw out on defense first because that's where he wants to be first. And then maybe you figure out where you move him eventually. We've seen both Florida and Florida State do this. Valdez Showers started at safety for Florida. He's now a running back. Carlos Williams started at safety for Florida State. He's now a running back. J.C. Jackson's a little bit more like a wide receiver. Obviously, he's done a lot of really good things as a wide receiver in prep play. But I think you throw them out as defensive backs first, see if they take, and then if they don't, figure out a way to make them playmakers on offense.
I think that's totally fair.
All right, fair enough. Andy Hutchins, of course, from Alligator Army on the SB Nation Network. By all means, go to Alligator Army. Enjoy all the coverage that they do. They do a fantastic job. SB Nation is essentially the network of Florida Gator fans trying to come to grips with all things Florida. But Andy, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your signing day, even without Adoree Jackson.
Thanks very much for having me.